Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. You know we like to get fiery around here, and today's no different.
Well, yeah, we've got a hot one.
We are diving into this piece from the Herald-Post-Mail.
This is a spicy one.
It's called First Amendment is the Most American Value in America.
Love it.
And right off the bat, they come out swinging
Yeah, they do.
with a really bold claim
Oh.
saying free speech is declining in America.
Yeah.
And without it, the country, they say, loses its identity.
You know, it's not just like an academic, dry look at it. You can feel the passion jumping off the page.
Fully.
It's a call to action.
Yeah, and they really,
They name names.
they do.
They're not pulling any punches.
Who are they calling out?
Woke people,
Okay.
politicians,
Uh,
corporations.
right.
The whole gang's here.
It's a pretty wide net they're
Yeah.
casting. But before we get into who they think the culprits are,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with their core argument.
Yeah, what are they actually saying is going on?
They claim America used to be
Okay.
the global champion
I thought of the guy.
of free speech.
Okay.
Now think about that for a second. Have you noticed any changes in how people are allowed to express themselves?
Or maybe even just like a hesitancy
Yeah,
to speak their minds.
for sure.
It-
I feel like it's definitely,
It's subtle,
it is subtle. Yeah,
but I think it's there.
yeah, fun.
The Herald-Post-Mail uses some
Historical examples too.
historical examples, yeah, some of which, frankly, made me chuckle at first.
Okay, like what?
Remember the attempts to ban Eminem in the 2000s? It seems almost absurd now.
Totally, yeah.
But I think their point is that was an early warning sign.
Oh, interesting.
They argue that the erosion escalated under Bush, Obama, and even Biden. It's not about one party or the other.
Across the board.
It's a systemic shift, they're saying.
And that's what I think makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's not
Yes.
just about politics, it's about culture.
Mm.
Now, the Herald-Post-Mail's argument about woke culture is particularly interesting.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that.
What are they saying about that?
Well, they're saying...
I mean, what they seem to be saying is that this push for sensitivity and
Yeah.
inclusivity has in some ways backfired
Okay.
and created a climate of fear
Right.
around expressing certain opinions.
Yeah, it's like you can't say anything anymore without
Right, so-
offending somebody.
We're like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, exactly.
You know who else they don't let off the hook?
Who's that?
Politicians.
Oh, politicians, right, of course.
They argue that politicians, regardless of party,
Uh-huh.
often prioritize their own agendas over truly protecting free speech.
Okay.
It's a cynical view,
Sure.
but I can't say it's entirely unfounded.
I don't think so either.
I mean,
It's a sobering reminder that power, in any form,
yeah,
can be a threat to free speech.
for sure.
And they go even further, though.
Okay.
They highlight the role of corporation,
Corporations, yeah.
which I think is really interesting.
Well, because they're the ones with all the power now.
Yeah, the power of social media giants.
Right.
Algorithms that control what we see.
Yeah.
The shadow banning.
Yeah.
The deplatforming.
It's like a new kind of gatekeeper.
It is.
But instead of a person, it's an algorithm
Exactly.
making the decisions about what's acceptable speech and what's not.
It's wild.
Yeah. And this brings us to probably the most thought-provoking part
What's that?
of the article. Their take on Donald Trump.
Oh, interesting.
Now, he's often seen as a champion of free speech,
Right.
but the Herald-Post-Mail argues that even he didn't actually improve the situation.
Okay, so how could someone so outspoken, who seemingly relishes pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
not make things better for free speech?
Right.
It's a great question.
It's a complex question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they don't really get into the why.
They kind of leave us hanging,
They do.
but I think it does challenge a common assumption.
It does.
Maybe it's about the unintended consequences of his rhetoric, the polarization he fueled, the way he himself attacked the press and his critics.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's about deeper societal trends.
That just continued?
It continued regardless of who was in office. I think it's a point that deserves further exploration.
Totally. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole,
right.
let's kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
Because the Herald-Post-Mail warns
Yeah.
that if there's no free speech in America, it's not America anymore.
Oh.
They even compare the current situation to Imperial Britain, which is not a flattering comparison.
Not at all.
They're using really strong language
They are.
to emphasize what they see as being at stake here.
What's that?
It's not just about the legal right
Oh.
to speak your mind.
Yeah.
It's about the soul of America.
So they're really saying that Without the ability to freely express ourselves, without dissent, without challenging power, America loses its essence.
That's exactly it.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
To think that the very thing that has defined America for centuries, this beacon of freedom and individuality,
Right.
could be slipping away.
And they don't mince words
Yeah.
when they say Americans need to wake up and fight for their right to free speech.
So they're saying it's a call to action.
Absolutely.
Be vigilant, speak up against censorship wherever you see it, and engage in constructive dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable.
So what does that look like
Yeah.
in practice?
How do we actually do that?
What are some concrete ways individuals can push back against this perceived threat to free speech? That's what we're going to delve into next.
You know, I think the Herald Post-Mail makes a really great point about the First Amendment
Okay.
being not just some legal technicality. It's like a fundamental
Yeah.
value woven into American society.
Yeah, they're saying defending free speech is synonymous with defending America itself.
Exactly.
It's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize how much we might take this right for granted,
Totally.
you know?
And I also appreciate that while they advocate fiercely
yeah.
for the right to express opinions,
Right.
they're not advocating for like a complete free-for-all.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
They're not saying anything goes.
Yeah, they acknowledge that there are limits to free speech, like defamation or threats aren't protected.
Right. It's not about being able to say anything you want, consequences be damned.
Exactly.
It's about the freedom to express your thoughts and beliefs,
Right.
even if they're unpopular,
Right.
as long as they fall within the bounds of legally protected speech.
Yes, and that's where I think the Herald Post-Mail's argument about the dangers of woke culture comes in.
Okay, so they're worried that this fear of causing offense is leading to kind of a chilling effect on open discourse.
Exactly.
So people are self-censoring,
Yeah.
afraid to speak their minds because they might be labeled insensitive or bigoted.
Right. It's almost like we've gone too far in the other direction.
It's like the pendulum has swung too far the other way.
We went from a society where certain groups were silenced and marginalized to a society where people are afraid to say anything for fear of offending anyone.
And that's the irony, right?
It is.
In an attempt to create a more inclusive and sensitive society, we may be inadvertently stifling the very conversations that need to happen.
Which is interesting because the Herald Post-Mail seems to be saying that we need to find a way to have those difficult conversations,
Yeah.
to engage with opposing viewpoints and to challenge ideas without resorting to censorship.
I think they're right.
Me too.
Open and honest dialogue,
Yeah.
even when it's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
is essential for a healthy democracy.
Absolutely. We need to be willing to listen to each other,
For sure.
even when we disagree.
Okay, so we've talked about woke culture. We've
Right.
talked about politicians.
Right.
But what about the role of corporations in all of this?
Oh, corporations, right.
The Herald Post-Mail argues that they're a major player in the decline of free speech, especially with the rise of social media.
Well, think about it. These platforms have enormous power.
They do.
They control the flow of information, they
Yeah.
shape public opinion, and they can silence voices they don't like with the click of a button.
It's true.
And the Herald Post-Mail suggests that they're often more concerned with protecting their brand image and appeasing advertisers than with upholding the principles of free speech.
Which is a scary thought.
It is.
It's like these corporations have become the new arbiters of truth,
yeah.
deciding what we're allowed to see and hear,
It is a form of censorship.
even if it's not coming directly from the government.
Right. It's a more subtle but insidious form of control.
It is, yeah.
And it's not just about censorship. It's
No.
also about algorithms that prioritize certain viewpoints over others, creating echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that confirms their existing biases.
It's like we're all living in our own little bubbles. And we're losing the ability to connect with people who think differently than we do.
And that lack of dialogue, that inability to bridge the divide, can have serious consequences for our society.
Exactly.
The Herald Post-Mail's warning about America losing its identity,
Right.
if it loses free speech,
Yeah.
starts to feel very real when you consider the role of these powerful corporations.
Sobering thought.
But the question is, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
How can individuals push back against this corporate control over